Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm so glad to see you today. Happy fall. It's really exciting that we're all together again here today. I'm coming to you live from the eBay campus, as you can see over my shoulder, which is very exciting. And we're, I think, just about ready to get going. So a very warm welcome. With saying thank you and a warm welcome to anybody who is joining us at a check-in for the first time. And then, of course, welcome back to anybody who has been at one of these check-ins before. We have a really exciting agenda for you today. It's full of eBay updates, details about our largest seller event, eBay Open 2022, which is coming in September. And then after the main presentation, we're hosting breakout sessions to allow you to get a deeper dive into some topics that you might want more info on. And then following the breakout sessions, there will be more networking hosted by some of you, our very own sellers. Now, I understand some people are able to access the chat right now. Maybe some people aren't able to access the chat functionality right now. If you are able to see it, just a little bit of housekeeping. For today's event, it's a little bit challenging. We may not have the Q&A tab. We may not have the chat tab. So I encourage you, because we know that questions and answers are one of the reasons that you come to this event. If you have the chat, please chat with your fellow sellers, have those conversations. If you don't have the chat and the Q&A, tell you what, please email us at events@ebay.com, and we will do our very best to get you answers on the questions that you came here today hoping to have answered. And thanks for bearing with us on if things aren't working exactly smoothly, but we're still going to have a great event today. So, the last bit of housekeeping that I want to tell you is that if you want to turn on captions for this event, you can do so by simply clicking on the CC button that you should see at the lower right of your screen. That'll open up a new frame where the captions will appear. Okay, so let's go on to the agenda now that we've taken care of all of those technical pieces. We really have a great agenda. I've been looking forward to this event tremendously. And before we dive into the agenda, actually, I did want to do one more reminder, which is that we want to hear your feedback about this event. You see the agenda here on the side. You're going to go through the whole event, the main program, including the breakouts afterwards. And if you stay for the whole thing and then you answer the survey that we're going to send to you, we're going to email that to everyone who attended today, you'll be entered into a drawing for a $200 gift card. Now, we did the same thing at our last event. Winner today at the very end of the event. And then the winner from today's event will be announced at the next one for winter. So yeah, we're trying to kind of persuade you to be here today and give us your feedback and then come back again for the next event. Okay, so now we're ready for the agenda. Thanks for bearing with. We're going to start by introducing you to our VP and Chief Revenue Officer, eBay Americas, Ashish Chabra, who will give us an overview of what his teams are working on this year. Then we're going to have an update on seller and buyer protections. And then lastly, I will be chatting with Forrester's VP and Principal Analyst, Sucharita Kadali. We've seen Sucharita here before, and we're happy to have her again. And she's going to give us an in-depth look at the silver lining from the pandemic, trends for 2023, and now that the dollar is stronger, what that means for you. We'll finish the main sessions. I'll come back and open and answer some questions that you all sent over when you registered for this event. So we still will have a little bit of Q&A. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 breakout sessions after the main program. You can choose from a one-on-one interview with seller Jude Lugo and Senior Manager of the Seller Community, Brian Burke. We filmed Jude for our Seller Spotlight series, and today we're sharing a sneak peek of his seller tips that before it premieres. So it's just going to be a short little video, and it's going to be a sneak peek. And then later this week, we're going to premiere his full Seller Spotlight video. And Jude will be answering a wide range of questions about his business. Then in another breakout, eBay's Mari Corella will discuss fashion re-commerce. I know that there's a lot of folks on here who are in the fashion space, so you'll probably be interested in this. She's going to talk about re-commerce sourcing tips and tricks with eBay seller Julie Shapiro of Casa Chic. And then if you enjoyed the conversation that I have with Sucharita, you can join her for a really in-depth look at that silver lining of the pandemic that we will talk about. And then finally, we have eBay's Director, Product Management, Tanya, and the Seller Experience team. They come back here often, and she's here to talk about the new listing flow updates and to answer your questions. If we can get that Q&A tab working. Listen, I encourage all of you to join a breakout. Put these together so that each of you has something to choose from to go a little bit deeper on a topic. And then all you have to do in order to join those breakouts is to click the blue join button when it appears after, and you can join the session after we finish the seller updates and the product and right after the Q&A. And I'll let you know when the right time is for that. So again, stick around and enjoy it. Now, speaking of connecting with your fellow sellers, in June, we kicked off our Seller Spotlight with sellers that some of you might know, Katie Silverberg and Vicki Egan. Then we also highlighted Kevin Santos, a graffiti artist who has turned his passion into an eBay business. And as I said, this month we'll be featuring Jude Lugo. Jude is a student, a business owner, and a 2021 up and running grant winner. And we're going to share a quick clip of Jude's selling tip with you all right now.
I think giving back to our community and having a local touch as well as a national touch is really important because we're serving our customers, we're doing this thing, but it distinguishes us in a big way from these big companies. Big companies that sometimes lose sight of the communities that they're part of. Whenever friends, family, or classmates have big things happen in their lives, we're able to donate to smaller community fundraisers to help people in our local community as well. So having the opportunity to have a small business that is really in touch with the people around us has always been a very important aspect of J&L making a difference for me.
Like I said, Jude is going to be in a breakout room sharing more about himself and tips he has for sellers and a little bit later. But first, I'd like to now introduce VP and Chief Revenue Officer, eBay Americas, Ashish Chavra, who is going to tell us a little bit about himself and his team priorities. So hi, Ashish, take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca. And hello, sellers. I'm Ashish Chavra. As Rebecca said, I'm Chief Revenue Officer for eBay's North American business. This is my first seller check-in appearance, and it's an honor to be here with you and meet you today. There's a lot going on that I'm excited to talk to you about. But before I dive into any of that, first a bit about me. I've been at eBay now for almost 9 years. My full tenure has actually taken place over 3 different stints, believe it or not. I first started here back in 2008. Was here for a while, then left, came back pretty soon after. I left again in 2015, and recently rejoined eBay back in 2019 to partner up with Jordan in this role. I just can't seem to quit eBay. I've done a variety of roles inside and outside eBay. They've all given me a fairly rich perspective on and new ideas, but above all, a great appreciation for how unique this community is, this platform is, this company is, and our purpose is. And that's what keeps me coming back to eBay. I buy across a number of categories on eBay myself, but even more importantly, I'm a seller on eBay myself. I sell across a bunch of different things, ranging from hot in-demand items like PS5s when I can get my hands on one, handbags, sneakers, clothes that my 3-year-old tends to outgrow a lot faster than we actually anticipate or estimate. Bulk boxes I bought on eBay to sell back on eBay. It's energizing, fun for me, but it's also an important way for us to walk in your shoes, understand what works well on our platform and what we still need to get better at to meet your needs better. So how does my role at eBay specifically plug into today's event and why it's important for you? The team I lead, revenue and selling for North America, make sure you have tools you need to grow your business on eBay and do it with a level of efficiency. To give you a little flavor on the different ways we engage on that, we'll touch on 4 different aspects you see here on the slide. We'll help market and promote your inventory, drive traffic to your listings, how we work across our partners to enhance tools that help your listings stand out, bring access to capital closer to you, and I'll talk to that in a minute, and how we engage with policies and regulations that impact you. Let me first start off with jumping into probably one of my biggest focus areas, which is how to grow velocity for you on the platform. Jordan mentioned earlier in his message, eBay is about connecting people with similar interests and passions. We made a lot of progress to help you build stronger connections with your most passionate buyers. I'll start with how we're making improvements in making your inventory and listing more visible. We do a lot of work here in partnership with Andrea Stairs and team. You met her before, to drive traffic to your listings. That happens through creating a placement and marketing strategy. Andrea and my teams work closely together on that. We focus on how we show up in search engines, social platforms, different referral networks to drive traffic to your listings. And all of that happens at no additional cost to you. We also work to make your listings more attractive to buyers. One of our biggest goals is to make sure you have tools to improve your reach and then convert buyers who show interest in your listings to actually make a purchase there. We built a range of buyer incentives to attract more buyers to your listings. We run a number of coupons, buyer incentives. Again, and all of that happens at no extra cost to you. We also have tools for you to engage directly with buyers to incentivize them to buy your items, like seller-initiated offers and coded coupons. And yes, I see that message on chat. We launched a new loyalty program, Top Star, which is aimed at attracting top spenders to eBay and retaining them. This is specifically for our highest spenders. We have started with that in sneakers, and it's coming to more categories. And again, that's at no extra cost to you. We do that to drive velocity and traffic to your items in your stores. And I'm sure you've heard about promoted listings. We continue to work to make that easier for you and more powerful for you to catch the buyer's eyes. You'll hear more about all of this at eBay Open in September. All of these map to our larger strategy, which include the other investments you heard Jordan touch on earlier today as well: authenticity guarantee, the new eBay Vault, and even the eBay Live. They're all part of our big picture to deliver the best shopping experience and keep increasing the buyer engagement. You heard Rebecca talk earlier about the ripple effect across eBay. That's how we're focusing on transforming eBay to become the ultimate shopping experience to connect buyers and sellers. We also know that at times growth needs for you access to more capital to keep growing your business. We offer different flexible working capital loans and lines of credits that these all integrate with our payments experience, the payments platform, to unlock more opportunities for you. If you're interested and haven't heard about this before, there's more information about business loans we offer, up to $500,000, and lines of credit up to $250,000 on our seller capital page. Definitely check that out. And finally, another focus for me and my team is partnering with a risk organization to create a safe and trusted experience for buyers and sellers. You heard from Jordan earlier, having a trusted platform is vital for continued buyer interest and engagement. Helps all of you who invest a lot of energy and passion and time in creating great experiences for buyers. But we also want to make sure that we are creating predictable conditions for you to do business in. I don't think it's surprising to say that the policy environment today is complex and it's changing rapidly. Regulations, whether shipping, cross-border trade, EPA mandates, 1099K, and a lot more are always unfolding and evolving. It's a very challenging space. So as new policies unfold, I hope you see we are advocating for you with government regulators, especially wherever we think your unique small business perspective is getting overlooked. Also try to move quickly to get ahead of these new policies and regulations where we need to comply, but do that in the best way possible to avoid disruption and workload on you guys and on your businesses. I know that while we continue to make significant strides here, we aren't perfect. My commitment to you will be that we'll focus on continuing to make improvements here, treat you as partners, communicate policy updates to you proactively and in a timely manner, build better predictability for you to operate your business on eBay. I will underscore that our best tool to keep getting better on these things is your feedback. It's really, really important to us, and I'm very serious about wanting to hear from you. So feel free to include any questions or feedback in today's post-event survey. Include word policy in all caps there. We'll respond to any issues you have after today's event. Whenever you come to us with a policy issue, We'll try to find the fastest way for potential resolution, but just as importantly, we want to learn from each of those and keep striving to serve you better. Trust is an essential part of our ecosystem and marketplace. It's one of the most important remits my team has. And I want to make sure we are approaching policies in a way that makes you confident in eBay and helps make your business, take your business to the next level. I know I touched on a range of topics today. I'll wrap up by saying that you're going to hear more over the coming months, including in September. Most important for me is to connect with you, share how committed I am to making sure you have all the things you need to grow your business on eBay as efficiently as possible. We'll keep delivering features to help you drive inventory awareness, exceed buyer expectations, drive them to return again and again to your eBay store for more purchases. It's been a privilege for me to connect with you all today. Appreciate you sharing your time. I can't wait to meet you in person in the future. And finally, thanks a lot for not just selling on eBay, but also for going the extra mile to be such incredible partners with us. On that note, I'll hand it over to Ian.
Thanks, Ashish. Really great conversation and highlighting some of the most important priorities of our platform. And something that Ashish talked about a lot was trust. And to introduce myself, I'm Ian Bednowitz, and I lead the protections team at eBay. And I'm responsible for a very key part of trust on our platform and work closely with Ashish on that. In particular, our eBay money back guarantee and all the policies associated with that, our seller protections, our return policies, and our policies around protection from abusive buyers. So what am I going to cover today? So I'm going to go through very specifically our returns process. With all of you. Returns are a very important part of doing business on eBay. And you guys are experienced sellers, so some of the basics I'm going to go through you probably already know, so I'm going to go through that quickly. But I want to just level set on why do you get returns? What's your responsibility as a seller when you get a return request? And then all of us know, unfortunately, there are bad buyers on our platform. And I'll spend the most time here on how do we protect you from these bad buyers? What does bad buying behavior look like? What are things that we currently have in place, and what are things that we have planned? Because having spoken to a lot of sellers across the world, I know this is always a top priority area that sellers are interested in. So let's jump into the basics. Why do sellers get returns? So there are two basic reasons that sellers get returns. And like I said, I think you guys know all about this. Number one, the buyer changed their mind. This is very simple. There are examples below this. And they ordered an item by mistake. They don't like it. Very common in fashion. The item doesn't fit right. We call these remorse returns. Then there's the other type of return. An item isn't as described. And this means anything that is different from what's in the listing. And it could be that the item is damaged or broken. That's the first example here. The laptop is broken and won't turn on. It's the third one as well. It also could be where the item differs in some way from the pictures or the description that you have on your listing. Now, buyer doesn't know the difference between these two types of item or these two reasons, or at least not outwardly. You see on the right, when a buyer is returning an item, we don't ask them, did they change their mind or is it not as described? They just go and pick a reason code there. Now, what are your responsibilities as a seller when a buyer files a return claim? So your responsibilities differ whether the buyer changed their mind or the item isn't described. So if the buyer changed their mind, first of all, you set that policy. So you decide whether you even take these types of returns, these remorse returns. Now, if you have a remorse return policy, and if the buyer makes the request within your return window, whether that's 14 days, 30 days, then we'll generally just go ahead and make it easy, auto accept that request from the buyer, and the buyer will get a label to send the item back to you. Once the item comes back to you, you have 48 hours to refund that buyer. Now, if the return request is outside of your window, And this is something that I think confuses some sellers because they still get a request. You don't need to accept that return. You can just decline that return. However, you can choose, if you have a 30-day policy and a buyer makes a request for a return on day 32 or 33, you may want to accept that return to offer good customer service, but that's left to your discretion. Now, on the other side, we have the item not as described. Now, for items that are covered by the eBay money back guarantee, which is the vast majority of items on your platform, when a buyer files a claim, says the item is not as described, we will generally auto accept that return. Even if you say that you don't accept returns, that's about the left side, not the right side. Now, in some cases, you have the chance to make it right with the buyer. You have 3 days if it arrived damaged or had missing parts, where you could say, hey, I'm going to partially refund you, buyer, and make you whole for this damage. Alternatively, you could also send out a replacement. Now, we don't have formal structure around that, but you could negotiate that in messaging with the buyer. And then finally, if you don't get resolution within the 3 days with the buyer, then the buyer will get a label to send that item back to you. So that's the returns responsibility. That's the basics. Now let's talk about bad buyers on the next slide. So what are bad buyers and potential bad buyer behaviors? They come in 3 primary flavors. Now there are other flavors out there, but these are some of the most common ones. Something we call a false SNAD, which is where a buyer says an item isn't as described when in fact it really is just a remorse return. They don't want the item, but because either you, the seller, don't accept the return, or because you don't offer free returns, they want to get a free return. And so they choose a reason. And these are buyers that know how those return reason codes work. A buyer returns a used or damaged item, or the most damaging, a buyer just returns an empty box, a different item, manipulates the label and sends it somewhere else. Now, what can you do in these situations? How do we protect you in those situations? So in the case of the false SNAD, you can report the buyer. So you see on the right of the slide, there's the report a buyer flow. If you report that buyer for a false SNAD, then you're eligible for a label credit up to $6. So you won't have to pay for the return shipping on that item. Now, if you're a top rated seller or you offer free returns, you have access to the partial refund tool, which is also there on the right, which means if you get a damaged item or you get a different item, you don't have to give the buyer back their full refund. You can withhold up to 50% of that item value. And now in any extreme case, you can always ask us to step in and to help. You can appeal any claims. But this is our protection as it is today. Now let's talk a little bit about where we're going with this and where we can get your help. So how do we ensure a safe and trusted marketplace? First of all, we need to find these bad buyers. And the box on the left, this is very important that you report buyers to us when you have these issues, because that's the way, we don't touch the item. So the only way that we know if there's a bad buyer is if you tell us, or in the middle box, we look at trends. So we look at data on claims. Are they doing excessive numbers of not as described claims or remorse return claims, especially if they're newer? Do they have examples where it looks like they are trying to fake the feedback that they have on their account? So we look for these types of trends, but when we get a report from you, that helps us prioritize looking at those buyers. Now, on the right, there are other things. This is a very important area of investment for my team and for eBay. We're doing more predictive approaches. We're going to use data science to try and anticipate when a buyer might be abusive, might be a bad buyer, so that we can take actions in advance. We're looking to do more linkage to other accounts across that buyers may have, so they can't come back again if we've caught them before, and use third-party vendors who have information about their behavior on other platforms. And what do we do with these buyers? Well, we'll warn them first if it's not too extreme, but if they're repeated offenders or if they've done what in essence returned a different item or an empty box, which in essence is virtual shoplifting, we'll completely suspend them from our platform. But I do want to leave you with this thought, with a couple of thoughts. One is that, you know, we take this seriously and we're investing in this. Two, we need your help to report these buyers. But three, also understand that as a marketplace, you know, there are black and white and there's gray. If we look at all of the reports of buyers, there are a broad set of buyers that are reported by just one seller. But when we look at how many of these buyers are reported by more than one seller, it goes down to less than 10%. So there's a whole lot of buyers out there where they say something was a SNAD and you may disagree as a seller. They may have opened an item, done something that they don't think is damage and you do. So their intention isn't always to be a bad buyer, but we need your data to say, hey, if that less than 10% is actually 20%, getting those reports really help. So thank you very much for the time. It's an honor to be here and share this with you. And if there are questions in Q&A, I'll be answering and come back. So I know this is always a hot topic.
Thanks, Ian. Now, some of you out there know Forrester, but if you don't, they are one of the expert research organizations we work with to better understand what's driving the retail industry and consumer spending in general. Today, Sucharita Kadali, who is frequently quoted by the business world for her retail insights, is joining to provide us a look at the months ahead in retail and e-commerce.
So Rebecca had talked about the pandemic silver lining, and I want to step back and talk about a little bit of the macro picture, because my point of view is a little bit contrarian compared to a lot of what you're hearing in the media, a lot of what you may be hearing from politicians, and a lot of what you probably have heard from politicians over the last couple of years with respect to the enormous debt that the United States has gotten into and all of the challenges related to the pandemic. When we step back and look at what happened through the pandemic and how it's so different from what happened in 2008, was that in 2008, 2009, the massive government stimulus that was sent out, the money that was printed, went really to a handful of institutions, primarily banks, and there were a lot of regulations around lending, so it didn't really make its way to consumers and households. What was different in 2020 was that we did also print a lot of money, but the printing of that money in many cases went directly into the hands of individuals and families. And you see that here. This is actually some of the graphics that came out of a New York Times summary of where all pandemic spending went, and nearly $2 trillion went directly to individuals and families, and that's not even counting the additional $800 billion that went to PPP loans. And those PPP loans essentially then flowed as essentially income into a number of employees who those small businesses didn't furlough. So, or they did furlough, but they weren't able to have in person. And to give you a sense of the magnitude of just how big $2 trillion is, it's essentially like 2 years of Social Security. So imagine that much money flowing into, let's say, the 40 million of the lowest income households in America. So it was a big deal. It was a big burst of financial security that these consumers were getting. On the next slide, these next couple of slides, I'm actually going to talk about what happened with that money. And a lot of that money went to doing things like upskilling consumers. So this is data from Coursera. And Coursera, as you know, is one online educational platform that they do have a lot of higher skill classes and degrees in everything from computer science to data science or whatever a consumer may want to take advantage of. And my estimate is that in the United States alone, about 6 million consumers took classes and were able to get new skills through Coursera alone. And that is only one of multiple platforms, not counting platforms like Udemy and community colleges and any type of other skills that even companies may have subsidized for consumers. And to give you a sense of how big of an audience that is, there are about 15 million people employed in retail in the United States, another 15 million employed in hospitality. So that's 30 million people employed in these relatively low wage hourly jobs. At least 6 million of them were basically taken out of the workforce and the hourly workforce because they now have the ability to apply to higher wage jobs. They, kind of certainly can always go backwards and kind of fill in any extra hours they have, certainly with hourly work. But these people don't need to look back if they don't want to. And what that means is ultimately the supply of labor, particularly in the lowest income demographics, is much lower than it was even prior to the pandemic. And that is one of the things that the stimulus payments did. Another thing that consumers did is they used that money to pay down debt. We've heard how much consumers, American consumers in particular, have in every type of debt, from mortgage debt to auto loan debt to educational debt to credit card debt. All of that, as you can see, in 2020 and 2021, almost overnight was paid down. And the worst of the debt which had the highest interest rates, the most delinquent debt, was what consumers used a lot of those stimulus payments to immediately take off the books. So that also put them in a much, much better financial predicament through the course of through the course of, kind of by the end of the pandemic. And really what I would describe took them out of their financial straitjackets that in many ways had held these consumers back. So what we have today is what I would describe as an extreme outlier of a situation. All of those situations that we see about the consumer being more financially secure, that is part of the reason that you have the y-axis here, which is that the percent unemployment in the United States today is amongst the lowest that we have seen in modern history. So we have about like 40 years of data points here where I mapped inflation rates by average unemployment rate in the United States. There are, yes, only a few years that have had higher inflation than what we are seeing now, but there's almost no year that has had lower unemployment than what we're seeing now. And there has never been a data point like this one where there is high inflation and low unemployment. And because of that, this is going to be a really unusual set of seasons for the next year, 2 years, because normally if you have high inflation and high unemployment, you can expect stagflation, you can expect demand declining, and as a seller, it's kind of hunker down for the worst. But it's a really, really weird time where, yes, prices are higher, but they're higher because people can afford to pay more across all demographics. So they are paying more for everything from essential to discretionary goods. And it doesn't seem like those income levels are coming down. And it doesn't seem like they are dipping too much into the savings that they generated over the last couple of years either. So all of these things are actually to the benefit of the United States and ultimately to businesses that are servicing and providing goods and value to these shoppers. Not surprisingly, that unemployment level is low and wages are high. That is in economics one of the kind of 1-2 punches of something called the Phillips curve, where typically if there is low supply of people, what happens are that wages go up, and when wages go up, inflation tends to go up in lockstep because that's one of the big inputs into producing anything. But I do want to step back and just say, let's look at this. This is actually a good thing for society. This helps everything from taxes to kind of the number of people who can afford the products that you're selling. Wages are at an all-time high, not as high as they were during the pandemic when supply was even lower, but they've stayed relatively high. And that is a good thing that as a country, we should be happy that we are achieving this at least now, and hopefully this stays. I will also say that one of the things that happened through the course of the pandemic was that a lot of consumers they felt empowered to quit their jobs. You've heard ad nauseum about the Great Resignation. But part of that is that consumers now have the wherewithal, the funding, the ability, the confidence to often start their own businesses. And that's exactly what this slide is that in 2020, 21, and even through the first half of 2022, we've seen record levels of new business creation. This is basically cumulative month over month new businesses that have been created in the United States. These are businesses that are often small businesses that the goal is that they will employ other people in the economy. These numbers are at a 10-year high. And, which means that, kind of we take it back to the last recession, we take it back to what we think are better economic times. And it's pretty strong. This is a good story as well and it's a truly American story too, because in this country, we love stories of entrepreneurship and people being able to own their destiny and being able to sell what they think is valuable to their communities. I'll also add that inflation is a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is that there are certainly challenges where there are, in particular, consumers at the lower end of the socioeconomic brackets where higher prices, particularly in categories like gasoline or food, are certainly not fun. But when we look at who comprises the vast majority of spending, it is the highest two income quintiles. So the top 40% of households in the United States, that's the dark green on the right-hand side. And these are consumers that are spending disproportionately more on everything from discretionary goods like entertainment to essentials like food. Now, what I will also say is that those two quintiles also are most likely to be homeowners. 80% of them, in fact, are homeowners. Most of those homes are financed through fixed rate mortgages. When you have a fixed rate mortgage, so you've taken on debt to buy this major asset in an inflationary environment, essentially that debt looks cheaper. And what you're paying becomes cheaper while the value of your home is appreciating. And what you have is a situation where people have maybe thousands of dollars a month in mortgage payments, but it looks to them like it's less. And as a result of that perception, there's that opportunity and that willingness, that ability to spend more on everything from discretionary goods to things that they hadn't purchased in the last couple of years, like travel. So that is also something that I think often is overlooked, is that there is this seemingly categorical negative that is in the media about inflation, that there's nothing that could be worse than inflation. But in reality, the challenge with inflation, the problem with inflation is that if it continues over time, you get to potentially hyperinflation. But, kind of a measured amount of inflation actually isn't always a bad thing, even for those that are some of the biggest spenders and the biggest asset holders. On the next slide, the other issue has been the amount of debt that was taken on as a result of pandemic stimulus. And this is something that you hear often, particularly amongst, kind of politicians in particular, is the challenges that these pose for the long term, the challenges that this poses for future generations. And what was really interesting about the last few months, and probably the last year or so, is that while the debt spiked up through much of 2020, that debt level has come down substantially. And, it's not something, it's almost sort of, much like e-commerce, we've sort of reverted to the 2019 trend. And there is, a bulk of there's a significant amount of money that we still now do have to pay back. But the flip side and the trade-off is that our tax base is higher than ever. The collections of the IRS are higher than ever. And as a result of that has softened some of the blow of what we thought would happen, which was just simply printing money and not being able to ultimately pay it back in any reasonable way. Net, this is perhaps one of the most important takeaways that I want everybody to recognize, and this is super important for everybody who is in retail, who's a seller, who's trying to reach customers, which is that retail spend is at an all-time high. And often people don't recognize this. We are now, as the United States, spending more across every consumer category, whether it's a physical good, a digital good, it's online, it's offline, than ever before in retail history. And even when you account for inflation, people are spending more. There are more units being sold of everything. There are more dollars being spent on everything. And this is a good thing for anybody who is in the business of selling, because the trend is going up, and your job is to make sure that you have the right merchandise to address these consumer needs, that you are competitive with the rest of the possibility of products that consumers may also be considering, and that you're delivering in a strong customer service environment, because that's probably one of the biggest challenges with selling in the US, is that it's a hyper-competitive retail environment, and a lot of the cost of doing business is in providing high benefits, things like fast shipping or free returns, or kind of these ultra competitive offers that companies like Amazon and others offer that raise the bar for everybody else. So just to summarize, because I just want to make this crystal clear, retail should fare well, and e-commerce should also fare well. And I think this next slide is actually an e-commerce number. So one of the things that we do at Forrester is that we do forecasts every year. And this is our 5-year forecast of e-commerce sales in the US. And a couple of things that I want to point out. In 2022, for the first time ever, e-com was about $1 trillion. And we expect that $1 trillion to translate into about 23% of all of retail. I expect that to grow to 28% by 2026. And, so this is the same trajectory that we saw prior to the pandemic. The pandemic was a strange anomaly, because a lot of people thought that the growth that happened during the pandemic would last. It was a burst of demand that was very unusual for its time. But now, subsequent to that, there's been almost an overcorrection in the other direction, where people are thinking that e-commerce is dead and that physical retail is going to take over. And that's completely not true at all, because that ignores the fact that we had a trend and a trajectory even in 2019 that was really, really challenging for physical stores. And that's not going to go away. And that's what you see here in these numbers. So as long as this is the new normal, this is how you're thinking about kind of the level set of where we are and where we'll be. I think this is a much more realistic assessment versus the last 2 years, which have been anomalies and very, very strange situations that were not, and have proven in retrospect to not be extrapolatable to the future. There are a couple of things that I want to call out for you as you are thinking in particular about making the most out of the holiday season. So I talked a lot about e-commerce. E-commerce is growing. You want to absolutely embrace that reality. Almost every category in e-commerce is growing. The only exceptions that I will say, and it's not even that it's not a growth story, but it is a different from inflation story, and that is something related to electronics. Electronics, if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI reports, electronics are one of the weird categories in retail right now in consumer spend where there is actually deflation. So when you see numbers from companies like Best Buy or even Walmart talking about their electronics numbers going down, it is not because inflation is causing people to pull back. It's actually quite the opposite in the case of that particular category, which is that the price of those goods, often due to sometimes due to supply issues, there's often too much merchandise out there because people overordered in the beginning of the pandemic. Also, some demand issues because people purchased a lot of electronics in the beginning of the pandemic and certainly don't need as much of those items now. So because of that, you have deflation. And so what you're seeing, though, is that those numbers in electronics are flat. but the deflationary element is so high. It's almost like prices are like anywhere from 10 to 20% lower than last year, but sales are flat to like down a couple of percentage points. So what that means is that when sales are down, it means that units are actually up, but the dollar volume is lower. And the dollar volume is lower because you have some of those prices being distorted and not following the rest of the inflation narrative that we have in the economy right now. Now, with respect to holiday, I encourage everybody to think about being early, and there are a lot of reasons for this. One is that historically, year after year, consumers complete about 10%, or I should say 10% of consumers are done with holiday shopping by October. So you don't want to miss that percent of people who are the early birds. The other reason for early is that every year there are inevitably late shipments. And there are late shipments because e-commerce is growing faster than the carriers are investing in e-commerce or in delivery in Q4. Nobody wants to build a church for Easter, which is essentially what shipping in Q4 is. And as a result of that, they just basically ship what they can. And if there's a weather delay or a snowstorm that's an ice storm, everything just gets backed up. And as a consumer, you order in December, you're taking a chance on whether or not that merchandise is actually going to arrive by the date that it was promised. So what we start to see is more retailers pushing their shipping cutoffs earlier. You see consumers trying to wrap up their shipping and their own shopping earlier. And if they can't get what they want or they're delaying, they would rather go to the physical store and complete their transactions when they know that they can get something. So the more that you can promote early, that you can jump on these trends earlier, the better for you. You also want to recognize that things like November shopping festivals. So there's 11/11 in China, but even in the United States, our big shopping festivals, of course, are Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Those numbers have been they're strong, but kind of the number of offers, the number of consumers, it's not necessarily the growth. The growth that we see on those days is not in line with the growth that you necessarily see in e-commerce overall, which suggests that even though the season is growing, it's growing on different days, either earlier or later in the season. The other piece is that supply chain issues may thwart last minute purchases as well, and you may still have some of those delays that I was referring to that you want to be conscious of. So get ahead of things, promote early, get things out the door, have the earlier cutoffs, message those earlier cutoffs, and make sure that your shoppers, or at least they've gotten what they need, kind of by early December at the latest. I also want to point out something that is really important from a sustainability standpoint, a consumer behavior standpoint, that I think is really well suited to the eBay seller community. And that is that consumers seemingly are embracing resellers more than ever, and they're embracing reseller behavior more than ever. We're seeing a lot more people recycling actively. We are seeing more people opting for higher quality purchases in the first place. So that was actually going back to that first question at the beginning of this session, where you talked about, kind of competing in the apparel world. This actually suggests that competing on quality is something that could have a lasting message, because so much of apparel purchasing in particular in the last decade has been about fast fashion. It's been about lower quality. It's been about, kind of simply churning goods and then throwing them into, kind of a recycling facility or a landfill. And that's not necessarily good for the environment, or that's definitely not good for the environment. And it's something that even consumers are recognizing they need to control. And I think this is fascinating, because all of this is happening without any regulation or anything compelling people to engage in this behavior. Not even laws that force them to do it, no incentives that force them to do it. It's just purely because of messaging around a lot of the wastefulness that comes with throwing away merchandise. And then the last bit is explicitly the number of people, particularly younger consumers, who are embracing purchasing secondhand. So these are all trends that support marketplaces, that support sellers on marketplaces, and give you an opportunity to message differently from some of the big guys that are out there. And I encourage you to think about, how are these principles that you can embrace in your own businesses? Are these messages that you can communicate on your product detail pages that may resonate? So I talked with Rebecca about cross-border trade, and this is just the tracking of the U.S. dollar over a long period of time, dating back to the mid-90s. And what we have here is the dollar and the euro being at one of the lowest levels ever in a long period of time. The last time it was lower than this was at the turn of the century. Remember, like Y2K. Ever since then, the euro has been strong. So every place where you see the numbers being high on this bar chart, that is where the euro is strong. Every place where the number is lower is where the euro is weak. And it is approaching a period of weakness, and it looks like it may fall even further. And the implications here, as I'd mentioned earlier, are really about thinking for if you have inventory that comes from overseas, or you are selling to sellers overseas, that is going to impact pricing. It's going to impact expectations. It will impact your competitive landscape. And you just want to be conscious of that. So if you can source cheaper merchandise from overseas, that's great value for American consumers. If you are selling overseas, it may be a tougher sell to Europeans or foreigners if the dollar is strong. But what you want to be thinking about is, are there certain items within your assortment that make particular sense for overseas sales? Are there ways that you can bundle items to make it seem like there is greater value, or that there's a really unique assortment that you are selling? And can you completely just shut out anything that could be low margin from some of those cross-border sales? So you want to be thinking about all of the different dynamics, because usually having a strong dollar is not necessarily the best thing if you are selling cross-border, although it's fine if you are actually just selling to your in-country consumers. So with that, I believe that's my last slide. The last slide, you can, if you flip to it, it's my contact information. It's actually a summary slide and then my contact information. We can actually go back to the summary slide. So I just want to wrap it up, and I know that we're short on time, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But value still matters. Showcase quality. E-commerce is going to be super competitive, so stand out in any way you can with that language on your website, with kind of really promoting attributes like quality. Don't wait until late November or December to sell that top inventory, because there is a good chance that it may not make it to consumers on time if you're promising them the merchandise by a particular date, like December 25th. And if you are dependent on overseas buyers, think carefully about your pricing strategy and your product assortment, because those overseas buyers may not have as much purchasing power, though American consumers will, particularly for foreign goods. So with that, I will wrap up.
Well, Sucharita, thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this section of today's event. And again, I want to encourage everyone to drop in and take a look at the content that Sucharita brought for her breakout session. I got a sneak peek of it. There's actually some really compelling data that I think everyone will enjoy. So please take some time and stop in there if that's the breakout session that you choose. So thank you again to everyone who spoke today. Really appreciate your time. And we had some great content that I think was really meaningful, hopefully, for the audience that's here today. Now, I'm going to wrap it up. And we're getting close to the end, but I'm going to talk about eBay Open for a while, which is coming up in September. So September 21st through 23rd, as you see right there on your screen. And registration opened July 20th, but it's not too late if you aren't registered for eBay Open. Please go ahead and take the opportunity to register. And what you're going to find in the event is 3 jam-packed half days where there's going to be networking, executive keynotes, training breakouts, category breakouts, sessions by sellers just like you, even more. And it's going to be fun, it's going to be informative, and we are making sure that it's going to be a great use of your time. eBay Open is our biggest seller event of this year, and the great news to know today is that the event is hybrid. The eBay Open Studios events that are being hosted by eBay in LA, Austin, and NYC are actually sold out already. There was really high demand for that, and so sellers will be in person there. But you know what? There's great news, which is that some local sellers who host meetup-style meetings already, and they have been doing it, some of them for several years. So those sellers are going to plan their own local watch parties. And I want to say thank you to any sellers who are here who are participating in that. Thank you for putting together local watch parties for sellers in your area. So all of you can find links in the resource center with a list of the locations where these seller hosted watch parties are going to be. And if you don't see one in your area and you want to host, you just select start a seller meeting on the eBay page, and we will get back to you about how that all works. We encourage everyone to mark your calendars for the full online event and join thousands of sellers like you for content and for sessions. And you're not going to find this stuff anyplace else. It's all specifically designed to help sellers like you grow your business and deepen your community connections to each other. I want to remind everyone, eBay Open Virtual is totally free to any seller. So all you have to do is sign up and then mark your calendars to attend in September. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the networking rooms that we are going to have at Open, and a little bit more about the local meetups and a new event that we're adding on September 8th for eBay Open registered attendees. During Open, we are going to have various networking rooms over those 3 days, each morning from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific. And at the end of the event, from around 12:30 p.m., we are going to have open networking rooms where sellers can talk to each other about topics that are important to you. We've actually been taking suggestions in from many sellers, and while we're still finalizing those exact topics, there will be a variety of networking rooms. So I'm sure that there's something for everyone. So it'll be like location. You can talk to other sellers in Texas or in the Northeast. It could be someone who is a seller that you know and admire and you want to get to know better. You can talk to them in a networking room. Or maybe it's an important topic. There may be ones about sourcing or, topics like that. So come to the networking rooms, talk to your other sellers. One of the best benefits about eBay Open is the opportunity that sellers have not only to hear from eBay executives and to get those trainings, to connect with each other, to find your community, to know that there are other sellers with the same questions, going through the same things that you are, celebrating the same wins that you are. So I really encourage you to come to eBay Open for that reason, on top of all of the great content. So I'm going to talk just very briefly again about those local watch parties that I touched on a moment ago. And we have breaking news, a list of the confirmed locations. And it sounds like we actually have confirmed locations in Denver, Fort Lauderdale, Chicago, Las Vegas, Akron, Ohio, Colorado Springs, Colorado, Rockland, which is near Boston, and Allentown/Philly. So that's a widespread across a lot of the country. I hope that many of you are close to one of those locations and you can make it, or again, you can start your own. Now, I mentioned a new event that we've added on. And so this year, before Open, we are hosting a sneak peek to hear more about what to expect at eBay Open, to hear from some of the seller speakers that as they preview their sessions, to get some advice from experienced sellers who have been to eBay Open, both live and virtual. And they're going to talk you through how to plan your day to get the most out of all of the content and all of the experiences. And we are going to be using a new platform for eBay Open this year. Those of you who have dealt with the gremlins here with us today, you might be glad about that. And we are really excited about this new platform, which not only should have better stability, but also have additional functionality that we think will make the eBay Open virtual experience even more rich and robust for all of you. So you'll want to join us for this sneak peek event on September 8th, as it says on your screen. And you will have the opportunity to get your hands on some pre-event swag just for people who come to this event. You have to register for eBay Open, the whole event, in order to receive your invite to the September 8th event. Again, register for Open, and you can come to the sneak peek, try out the new platform, get your hands on some swag, and learn a little bit more about what eBay Open is going to be like. So speaking of the time during the actual eBay Open event, if you check out the resource library, there is a link that annually we produce an eBay Open agenda builder. We have it live for everyone here today. Right now, when you go into the link, you'll be asked a few questions about what type of seller you are, if you're like a super experienced seller, if you're just getting started. And then we'll ask you about what you want to learn from other sellers and also from eBay leaders. The survey is then going to crunch your answers, and it'll recommend a schedule with a handful of topics based on your answers. So make sure you check the resource library. You guys have it here first, and then it's going to go live on our Facebook page for all sellers starting August 18th. So if you missed it today, come back to the eBay for Business Facebook page, and you can find it there. And hey, you know what? You can take the quiz as many times as you like to see if you change your answers. You know, what different recommendations do you get in terms of the content that you'll want during Open? So if you have any questions about, please put them in the chat. I understand the chat's working a lot better now. It looks like the slides are working a lot better now, and we'll do our best to answer some of them. Or you can just, reach out to me and let me know if you have any questions there. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating today, for taking time out of your days, out of your business, out of the work that you do, and for being here to listen to the great content that our eBay speakers brought. Thank you for being a part of this event, and we're really excited about Open. So after the event, we are going to send you an email that's going to have an image. If you're super excited about Open like I am, it's an image that you can share on your social channels and say, hey, I'm going to Open, and you can celebrate the fact that you are signed up for eBay Open and that you're really excited to attend, because that's how one of the ways that you are learning to grow your business. And then, of course, make sure to register. So now we're going to move over to Q&A, and I'm going to focus on some questions that we actually received during the registration portion of getting registered for today's event. We asked everybody and gave you the opportunity to put a question in during your registration flow, and I'm going to go ahead and ask a couple of the questions that came in. So if Ashish is still here, Ashish, I'm going to call on you first. We had a question about stock photos, and I think you're the right person to answer this. The question that we had about stock photos is about, when can we use them? Can we ever use them? Why are some listings pulled and others not? And is there a clear policy from eBay? I know that this is a hot topic. People understand that it's in some ways related to Vero, and I'm just hoping that you can take a moment to talk about using stock photos. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, especially because I think once the question came in, the team's been working to also publish a more clear answer on this on our help pages. But for the folks on the call, yes, you can use stock photos, but if you own them or you got them from eBay catalog, or you have prior permission from the rights owner to use them. Now, one of the things I'll ask is, in general, if you're using a stock photo from another source, from another retailer, from a brand site, just confirm that you have the right to use it on your listings to sell items anywhere, and especially on eBay. When we remove the listings for violations on stock photo use, it's usually because we're reacting to reports from the owner of the photo telling us they own the rights to that photo, and you do not have required permission from them to use it on your listings to sell items. So that's the policy. Thank you for the question from the sellers who sent it in. The team's using that feedback to make the policy published and more clear on our help pages now. Great.
Thanks, Ashish. So when we took in the questions during the registration flow, we saw probably more questions from fashion sellers than anybody else. Of course, we are going to have that be a breakout, but I'm going to ask Mary Corella, our GM of Apparel, to come on. And Mary, we want to ask, how do I make an incredible clothing listing? And I am paying attention because I sell a lot of shoes. But sellers want to know, like, what are your tips for making a great listing?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. There are so many great tips that I can give you, but I'm going to give you one really big one today, and that is measurements. Measurements is the #1 return reason, not just at eBay, but industry-wide for all apparel. For eBay, we know that 30% of member-to-member messaging that happens for an apparel item prior to sale has to do with measurement. Someone's not asking for the waist size or maybe the inseam, something that won't show up in a size chart necessarily. So even say, for example, you're selling a J. Crew t-shirt. It can be this big, size small, or it can be this big, size small, depending on the fit. So because of that, it's really important that you take out that measuring tape and you put the exact measurements on there, because we want to make sure that the buyer gets exactly what they're looking for, that fits them, and that they're satisfied with their purchase. I will be giving a lot more tips at eBay Open, so definitely join for that.
Great. Thank you so much. And then we had a few questions about listings again, which is perfect since Tanya, Director of Product Management Seller Experience, and she's also going to be hosting a breakout. But there were a few questions, I'm going to bundle them together, a few questions which I thought, Tanya, if you're here and ready to come on camera, that I would love for you to answer. One of the questions is whether the first 5 words in the title of a listing are really all that important.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think the ordering it's not really about the first 5 words, interestingly, but the first few words I would say are definitely important. They're critical not just for buyers to be able to selling. You want to entice the buyers. They're going through a list of search results to know exactly what product you're selling. So putting the brand up front, if that's relevant, putting some product identifier like the model or a detail that's going to help them, again, kind of hone in on your item, is really important. And so for scannability and readability for the buyer, those first few words are really critical. In addition, search engines also, as they're trying to index and find your item, right, that's also important from a back-end perspective, but definitely for buyer search. Do you want to go to the other question, Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. So the second question is, can you give us a little information about what is the most important content to have in the description? What do we really need to include there?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I would say first off, the description should be easy to read and understand. So similarly, like a lot of buyers these days are shopping on their mobile devices. And on a small screen, long paragraphs of text are very difficult to parse. It's more complex to read, and a lot of times it actually turns buyers off. So keeping your information bite-sized, using short sentences, bullets if possible, break things apart so that it is easier to read on a small screen. That's kind of tip number 1. In addition, the actual details of what you might include, then there's things like, just obviously, again, repeating what it is you're selling. Whether that's repeating the title, some sellers like to do that as a best practice, but highlighting what are the key details about the product once again. So you don't have to repeat everything you put into item specifics, but maybe calling out a few things like what's the color, the brand again, the model, etc., the size or style. If it's relevant, you could also add some short description of the product benefits, and that's to really entice the buyer and sell them right on what it is that you're listing. And then if the item isn't new, if it's not brand new condition, then putting in some details about what the item condition is, right? Like some extra detail to support the pictures that you probably already took as well, that hone in on any defects or scratches and things like that on the product.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in and answering that question. So it looks like I was able to grab a couple of live questions that came in from the Q&A, and I'm going to go back to you with this question that we got from Jerry about returns. So Jerry's question about returns is she would like to know, are returns going to be changing to a shorter return window? Because it feels like anything longer than 7 days is way too long. I know I've heard this feedback myself. So Ian, if you're here, can you come back on camera and talk about return windows and our approach?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Rebecca. And I saw this question actually come up in different forms from multiple sellers on the call. So I'll answer this in a few ways. First, probably the simplest, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, you can specify your own return window for items for returns when the buyer changes their mind. Now, I'm sure you're talking about, in most cases, the window for an item is not as described, is 30 days as per the eBay money back guarantee. We have, in certain categories, started to change that policy to shorter windows where we've seen that is the industry standard. For instance, in trading cards, we've shortened it to 3 days. In categories with authenticity guarantee, we've enabled something called final sale, where there is no ability after the item is authenticated for the buyer to return that item. As we are moving and investing more and more in our focus categories that you've heard about a little here, you'll hear about at eBay Open, which is a big focus area for eBay. As we're changing those more to industry standards, we'll look for opportunities where it may make sense to adjust the return window shorter in some cases. But overall, we want to make sure that for our buyers and for our sellers that we're offering a return window that is a not as described return window that is consistent with competitors in the market.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Really appreciate that. And then I think the last question that all we have time for today is from a fashion seller, Veronica, asking about item specifics for clothing where character is not applicable. I've definitely seen this question. And she would like to know, Mary, if you're available still, would eBay consider making that an additional detail and not a required detail? There are others that make listing a challenge, but that character one really seems to get a lot of attention because, hey, not everything has a character on it.
Indeed. Thank you for having me back. And that is a great question. So we regularly look at all of the details that are required in our listing flow. Depending on who the buyer is, they want to look for something specific, and that leads to a higher converting product listing. But that just seem a little out of place. And like character, it doesn't apply to everything. We do regularly review all of these details and keep them up to date. But we recognize that it's time for us to do a little deeper cleanup this time. So there are category managers working from on the fashion team from all across the globe who are doing a deep dive into this right now, and they will be rolling out some changes by the end of the year.
Great, that's great news. Thank you. Thanks, Mary, appreciate it. So we know that there are going to be some questions that were put into the Q&A tab that are unanswered. We don't have enough time to answer the many, many questions we get in. So we're going to take those, we're going to save those questions. We know who asked them, and we're going to do our very best to get as many answers out to you in the audience who ask questions as we possibly can. Or again, as I alluded to at the beginning of the event, you also can send an email to sellerevents@ebay.com, and we will do our very best to get you an answer to whatever question that you have today. I want to say thank you so much for everything. The very last thing that I want to share is, as promised, the winner of our sweepstakes for the last event is Trish Rucker. Trish, if you are here, congratulations. Very excited for you. And we will send you an email afterwards if you're not here, and then we'll get that gift card right out to you. That's a $200 gift card. And for everybody else in the audience, remember, you can take the post-event survey to be entered, and we will announce the winner at our next seller check-in in a few months. And now, as we go over to the breakouts, again, there's 4 different ones. I hope that you enjoy them. We want to just play this feel-good video to remind everyone that our community is made up of many different types of people. And here at eBay, we celebrate all of you. Thank you.
Communities, no matter how big or how small they are, whether they're in your hometown downtown or online, your workplace or your home. Communities are built on shared passions and principles.
On respect, on making the people in them truly welcome. People from around the world have made eBay the world's most vibrant, most dynamic marketplace. The eBay community is where those people go to connect, learn, and grow.
Our community guidelines were created to help every member feel respected, supported, and safe. Thank you for being a part of the eBay community.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for making every member welcome.